Amahle threw herself onto the mat, frustration bubbling up inside her. The dry, gritty taste of Gary had become all too familiar, a reminder of the life they were struggling through. Her mother's voice was soft but weary, carrying years of sacrifice and resilience.
Amahle,
Her mother said, her voice filled with a patient sadness.
I know you don't want Gary. I don't want it either. But we have to make do with what we have. Soon, things will get better.
Amahle looked at her mother's face, worn with years of work and worry. She knew how hard her mother had worked to give her even this meager meal, but she couldn't shake her disappointment. In her mind, she was back at school, watching her classmates buy rice and beans, fried plantains, and meat. The thought made her stomach ache.
But Mama, isn't there any other way? Can't we get a loan or something?
Her mother gave a weak smile.
A loan? My girl, who would lend money to a woman like me? Besides, loans have to be paid back.
Amahle fell silent. She knew her mother was right. Still, the weight of their poverty felt like too much to bear. The next day, Amahle was walking to the stream with her bucket when she noticed a group of village women gathered, talking in hushed voices. She walked up, curiosity getting the better of her.
Amahle, come here.
One of the women called.
We were just talking about the youth program happening in the city. They're giving out grants to young people who have ideas for helping their communities. Maybe you could apply.
Amahle's heart skipped a beat. She had never thought about grants or programs. But as the women explained, she began to see a glimmer of hope. She ran home, bursting through the door to tell her mother.
Mama, there's a program in the city. They're giving grants to young people. If I apply, maybe we don't have to eat Gary every day.
Her mother's eyes filled with cautious hope.
Amahle, that would be wonderful, but how would you get to the city?
Amahle's face fell. She hadn't thought about the logistics. It was a long journey and they had no money for the trip. But seeing the spark of hope in her mother's eyes, she was determined. The next few weeks were hard. Amahle took on every small job she could find, from fetching water for neighbors to helping in their small farms. Eventually, she saved enough for the bus fare. On the morning of her journey, her mother pressed her hands into hers, her voice breaking.
Amahle, no matter what happens, remember you are loved, you are brave, and you will make it.
Amahle nodded, her own eyes welling with tears, and boarded the bus with nothing but her mother's blessing and a heart full of hope. The city was overwhelming, but Amahle stayed focused. She applied to the program, explaining her dream of starting a small food stall in her village to provide affordable meals and bring a little prosperity to their home. When she finished her presentation, she saw something she hadn't expected. The panelists smiling, nodding in approval. Weeks passed, and then one day, a letter arrived. Amahle read it, her heart racing. She had been approved. A grant was waiting for her. When she returned to the village, her mother's face lit up with pride. They would never have to go hungry again. And though Amahle knew it would be hard work, she was finally on a path that promised a future. A future where Gary was just one of many options, not their only choice. Amahle watched her parents toil endlessly, their bodies worn from years of hard work. She felt a weight in her heart every time she looked at her father's calloused hands and her mother's tired eyes. They had already sacrificed so much, and now they were planning to take loans and spend all their savings just so she could go to university. It was a burden she couldn't bear to put on them. One evening, as they sat outside under the stars, Amahle finally voiced her thoughts.
Mama, Papa, I don't think I should go to university. You have both given up so much already. I can't let you go into debt for me.
Her mother gently took her hand.
Amahle, you are our hope. We don't want you to struggle as we have. We will find a way.
Her father nodded, adding,
You are bright, Amahle. We believe in you. This education is your way out. Don't worry about us. We'll manage.
Amahle spent the night wrestling with her thoughts, torn between her dreams and her family's sacrifices. She knew that if she wanted to make their efforts worth it, she couldn't let this opportunity slip away. But she also couldn't shake the guilt. The next morning, she heard about a government scholarship for students from underprivileged backgrounds. The scholarship was competitive, but if awarded, it would cover her tuition and provide a stipend for living expenses. This was her chance. She didn't want her parents to suffer anymore, and this scholarship felt like the only way. Amahle dedicated herself to the application process. She spent late nights filling out forms, writing essays, and gathering documents. The weeks passed by in anxious anticipation, and her family joined her in the waiting game, each day filled with hope and fear. One evening, Amahle returned from the market to find her mother waving a letter in the air, her face alight with joy.
Amahle is here, the scholarship letter.
With trembling hands, Amahle tore open the envelope and scanned the contents. As her eyes moved across the words, a tear rolled down her cheek. She had been accepted. She'd received the scholarship. Her parents hugged her tightly, and for the first time in a long while, Amahle felt the burden lifting. She wouldn't have to choose between her dreams and her family's well-being. Her parents wouldn't have to go into debt or push themselves beyond their limits. She was going to university, and she was going to make them proud. The day she left for school, her mother whispered,
Remember where you come from, Amahle. Make every sacrifice count.
With her heart full of gratitude, she nodded. As the bus pulled away, she looked back at her parents, waving goodbye, and she knew she'd carry their love and sacrifice with her every step of the way. Amahle had barely set foot on campus when she felt the rush of city life overwhelm her. Everything was loud, bustling, and constantly moving. She found herself staring up at the towering university buildings, completely awestruck, trying to imagine what secrets they held within their walls. The roads were lined with cars, buses, and motorcycles, their honks and rumbling engines so unfamiliar compared to the quiet paths back home. It didn't take long before Amahle realized she felt out of place. Her clothes were simple, her shoes a bit worn, and her accent clearly marked her as a village girl. She struggled to find her way around, often walking in circles, clutching her schedule tightly in her hand. One afternoon, after getting lost for the third time, she found herself near the library. She looked around, trying to figure out which building she was supposed to enter, when a girl with bright clothes and a warm smile walked up to her.
Hey, you look a bit lost. Are you okay?
The girl asked, her eyes friendly. Amahle's shoulders relaxed as she nodded shyly.
Yes, I'm trying to find my lecture hall, but I keep getting lost. This place is so big.
The girl laughed, not unkindly.
I know the feeling. My first week here, I got lost every day.
She held out her hand.
I'm Zuri. Let me help you find your way.
Grateful, Amahle took her hand.
Thank you, I'm Amahle.
Zuri guided her through the campus, pointing out the different buildings, shortcuts, and good study spots. She had an easygoing, confident way about her that Amahle admired instantly. As they walked, Zuri filled Amahle in on all the little secrets about campus life. Where to buy the best food, which professors to avoid, and the importance of balancing studies with self-care. Amahle soaked in every word, feeling as if she'd finally found a small anchor in the vast sea of city life. Over the next few weeks, Zuri became Amahle's first real friend. They would meet for lunch, study together, and even explore the city on weekends. Zuri had a knack for making everything seem exciting and possible. She was the first person Amahle shared her story with, about her family's sacrifices and her hopes for a better future. Zuri listened intently, then placed a reassuring hand on Amahle's shoulder. Amahle, you're stronger than you think. You're here because you earned it. And I'll be right here beside you, every step of the way. With Zuri's friendship, the overwhelming city felt a little more welcoming, and the intimidating university became a place of promise and adventure. Amahle felt herself growing more confident each day, embracing her studies and exploring her new world, all while keeping her family's dreams close to her heart. Amahle looked at Zuri with a mix of envy and curiosity. The aroma from the snacks Zuri brought filled the room, making Amahle's stomach ache even more. She couldn't remember the last time she had eaten something so nice, let alone worn anything as colorful or stylish as what Zuri wore. Zuri noticed her gaze and laughed softly.
Amahle, I know how hard it can be. The city is expensive and being a student is tough. But if you want to enjoy yourself, sometimes you have to find a little help.
Amahle hesitated.
But why, your boyfriend buys you all these things, even though you're both students?
Zuri shrugged.
Not all of them are students. Some of them are older, with jobs and money. They like spending time with us and helping out. It's like they're sponsors. It's common here. They get companionship. We get a little help. Win-win.
Amahle fell silent, trying to process this. She had heard about these sponsors from other girls on campus, but she'd never seriously considered it. The idea seemed foreign, even a little intimidating. But Zuri made it sound so simple, so casual. Days passed, and Amahle continued to struggle. Each night she lay awake, stomach rumbling, wondering if there was any way to balance her studies and survival without burdening her family back home. She thought about how hard her parents were working, how her mother would skip meals to save up money to send her, how her father worked from dawn to dusk on other people's farms. She didn't want to ask them for more money. But every time she saw Zuri or other girls on campus, carefree and dressed in beautiful clothes, the temptation grew stronger. One evening, Amahle found herself talking to Zuri again. She finally asked,
Do you think I could get a sponsor?
Zuri gave her a long look, as if measuring her friend's resolve.
It's not something you have to do if it doesn't feel right, Amahle. But if you want to, I could introduce you to some people. It's an option.
Amahle nodded, unsure but desperate. A part of her felt guilty even considering it, but she was tired of struggling, tired of feeling left out and mocked. She wanted a taste of the comfort she saw all around her, even if it was just for a little while. That weekend, Zuri introduced Amahle to a man she knew, a businessman in his 30s. He was kind, charming, and showered her with attention she hadn't felt in a long time. The first time he took her out, he bought her a beautiful dress and a meal she couldn't have dreamed of affording. It was overwhelming, and a part of her was thrilled to finally experience the life she'd only envied before. Amahle found herself pulled deeper. At first it was just a few late nights out, a party here and there. Her friend would tell her about men they knew who were generous and who could help her get the nice things she wanted. Eventually, she began spending weekends with them in the city's expensive clubs. She reasoned with herself that she wasn't doing anything wrong. She was just enjoying life and exploring new things. But as time went on, her grades started to slip. She skipped classes to go on weekend trips with her friends and their sponsors, as they called them. These men would shower them with money, gifts, and trips. She began relying on them for things her parents would never be able to afford. She even stopped calling home as often, ashamed of the choices she was making, but unable to pull herself out of the lifestyle she'd adopted. Amahle was enjoying this glamorous life. On one of her visits to the mall to shop for her needs, a young man walked up to admiring her beauty. He was dressed in little clothing and big expensive jewelry on his neck. He had an earring on both his ears, a bird tattoo on his arm, and his hair dyed green. He asked for her number, which she gave him reluctantly. After his first call, he transferred a huge amount of money to her, more than what her sponsor had given her, just for a phone call. She knew he was a Yahoo boy, and she was in to enjoy all he has to offer. Amahle could hardly believe her luck. The man's name was Malik, and he had a bold, almost reckless confidence about him. He wasn't like her sponsor. Malik was young, flashy, and free, as if the world had no rules he was bound by. The day after their first call, she received a notification on her phone. A staggering amount of money transferred directly to her account. Just like that. For nothing but a few minutes of conversation, it was more money than her sponsor had ever given her at once, and it left her dizzy with excitement. All of a sudden, the clothes, the accessories, the meals she had only dreamed of were within reach. Malik sent her messages filled with compliments and promises of more gifts, hinting at the places he'd take her and the lifestyle he'd introduce her to. Amahle knew, deep down, the kind of life Malik was living. The rumors on campus were full of stories about Yahoo boys who made money through fraudulent means, duping people overseas, living off the riches of their schemes. But she brushed those thoughts aside. After all, Malik was treating her well, and she couldn't deny how it made her feel. The money, the luxury, the attention, all of it made the difficult years of poverty seem so far away, like a bad dream she was finally waking up from. Her newfound lifestyle quickly caught the attention of everyone around her. The girls who had once mocked her now watched her with envy. She was the one with new clothes, the latest phone, and expensive makeup. She ate at upscale restaurants and posted pictures of her meals, her outfits, her outings on social media. She enjoyed the admiration, the sense of power it gave her. No longer was she the quiet village girl struggling to make ends meet. She was Amahle, the girl with connections, the girl living large. But with the glamour came a growing sense of dependence. Malik was generous, but he had expectations. Soon, he would message her at all hours, demanding her time, asking her to meet him whenever he called. Sometimes, he'd become possessive, questioning her about her other friends, checking in on where she was. And the more gifts she accepted, the harder it felt to refuse his demands. It was as though every designer dress, every night out, every cash transfer was tightening a rope around her, pulling her further away from her values, her independence. Then one evening, Malik invited her to a party at a lavish penthouse. The room was filled with people dressed in expensive clothes, surrounded by loud music and heavy drinking. Amahle was dazzled at first, but as the night wore on, she began to see the darker side of it all. She noticed Malik and his friends exchanging furtive glances, slipping off into back rooms, whispering about clients and deals. She felt out of place, a stranger in a world that we seemed glamorous on the surface, but carried a hidden weight she couldn't ignore. It was then she spotted a girl from her class, a girl who had been living the same way Amahle was now, but whose appearance had changed. Her once bright eyes looked tired. Her clothes, though expensive, seemed to hang off her thin frame, and her laughter sounded forced. Amahle felt a pang of recognition, as if she were looking at a future version of herself. She couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness that settled in her chest. Months turned into a year, and Amahle was barely holding on. One day, her sponsor got arrested, and all the money and gifts came to a halt. The man had been involved in some illicit dealings, and Amahle found herself caught in the chaos, with no financial support and a trail of debts from the lifestyle she could no longer sustain. She had neglected her studies for so long that she was at risk of failing the semester. Her friends, whom she thought would support her, distanced themselves once the money dried up. Amahle sat alone in her small empty room, the once vibrant clothes and accessories gone, sold off piece by piece to cover debts and basic necessities. The glamorous life she had chased now felt like a distant, bitter memory, leaving behind nothing but regret. Her sponsor's arrest had shocked her at first, but the full impact only occurred when his payments and gifts stopped coming. Suddenly, she was without any support, sinking under the weight of expenses and debts she could no longer afford. Her friends, who had once filled her life with laughter and excitement, seemed to vanish overnight. Their reassurances, their company, all of it disappeared as soon as she was no longer able to keep up with their lifestyles. For the first time in her life, Amahle felt truly alone. Her academics had been pushed aside for so long that catching up felt almost impossible. She couldn't concentrate on her lectures knowing that she was already far behind. The semester was slipping away, and the thought of failing haunted her every waking moment. She knew how hard her parents had worked to give her this chance, and the idea of losing it all made her feel sick with guilt. Desperate and ashamed, Amahle called her mother one night. She tried to keep her voice steady, but her mother could hear the sadness and fear in her words.
Amahle, my child, no matter what has happened, remember that we love you. Come home if you need to. We will find a way to get through this.
Amahle wanted to cry, to tell her mother everything, but she couldn't bring herself to add to their worries. Instead, she promised herself that she would fix this. She would find a way to stand on her own to make up for all the mistakes she had made. The next day, Amahle went to her professors, explaining her situation and asking for any chance to make up her missed assignments. She knew she couldn't undo the months she'd wasted, but she was determined to fight for her education, even if it meant starting over from the beginning. It was a humbling experience, but little by little, she began to rebuild. She took on small jobs around campus, working in the library, tutoring younger students, and even cleaning lecture halls. The pay was modest, but it was honest work, and each paycheck felt like a step toward reclaiming her life. One day, while working in the library, she ran into an old classmate, Amina, who had known her back in her simpler days. Amina had always been studious and grounded, and when she saw Amahle, she didn't look at her with judgment or pity. Instead, she offered a warm smile and invited Amahle to study with her. As they studied together, Amina quietly encouraged her, never asking about the past, simply offering friendship and support. Over time, Amahle opened up, sharing bits of her story, her regrets, and her dreams. Amina listened, and without a word of reproach, helped Amahle find study resources and guided her in organizing her workload. With Amina's friendship and her own determination, Amahle slowly found her way back. She focused on her studies, gaining strength from each small accomplishment, each grade that showed her she was capable of turning things around. Though the road was long, Amahle learned to find pride in her journey. She discovered strength within herself that she never knew existed, and finally felt at peace with the person she was becoming. Someone shaped by mistakes, but also by resilience and hope. By the end of the semester, Amahle had passed her exams, barely but enough to keep going. She felt a newfound gratitude for the chance to start again, no longer taking any opportunity for granted. Though life was still difficult, she knew now that true success wasn't measured by wealth or appearance, but by the courage to rise, even after falling. When she called her mother to share the news, there was a new strength in her voice. Her mother's proud words filled her heart, reminding her that she was still on the path her family had dreamed for her, a path she was finally ready to walk, one step at a time. Amahle walked into the new semester with a renewed sense of purpose. The job at the supermarket had been exhausting, long hours on her feet, handling countless customers and working late shifts. But for the first time, she felt the pride of earning her own way. Each paycheck a tangible reminder of her hard work and dedication. Every day on the job taught her something new: patience, perseverance, and the value of every small step forward. When she returned to campus, Amahle had enough savings to cover her basic needs, plus the provisions her parents managed to send. It wasn't a luxurious amount, but it was enough. She no longer felt the pressure to impress anyone or keep up with a flashy lifestyle. The superficial allure of expensive clothes, gadgets, and fast money no longer tempted her. Instead, she felt secure in knowing she was finally building her future with integrity. Her studies became her main focus. She spent her days in the library working through textbooks, meeting with study groups, and asking for help when she needed it. Slowly, her grades improved, and with each small success, she felt herself regaining the confidence and self-worth she'd nearly lost. Their tireless work to put her through school were the real measure of wealth. The kind of wealth that couldn't be bought with easy money or fake friendships. Hard work, she now understood, was the foundation of lasting success. One evening, as she walked back from the library under the dim campus lights, Amahle looked up at the stars. She thought of the journey she'd been on, the mistakes she had made, and the strength she had discovered within herself. The path hadn't been easy, but it was hers. She was finally building a life she could be proud of, a life her parents would be proud of. Amahle knew she still had a long way to go, but she walked forward with steady steps, her heart filled with quiet determination and a deep gratitude for the life she was creating, one rooted not in glamour, but in grit, honesty, and hard-won wisdom. Thank you for joining me on this journey of storytelling. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe so you can be part of the next chapter and every inspiring message to come. Turn on the notification bell to be among the first to dive into each new story filled with lessons, hope, and growth. Your support, likes, and shares mean the world to me and keep these stories alive. Let's continue spreading inspiration, one story at a time. Thank you for being here, and I can't wait to share more with you.